Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Claire. Join us for a conversation all about challenging the status quo of eroticism. Together we talk about learning to receive sexual pleasure, transforming jealousy into erotic energy, and how your community shapes the expansiveness of your fantasies. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy, and I am also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, unleashing your divine whore. Yes, just yes. How can we ride that line between the Madonna and the whore? How can we stand in both to really rewrite the narratives of what is possible? Gosh, this podcast space, as well as this conversation specifically, I hope is a step in that direction to understand that you can absolutely be your sluttiest self and your most educated, holy, spiritual, all of that stuff, right? It's time to break this box of one or the other and to know that we can embody both. And that journey to embodying both is never ending, right? I continue to take one step each day, a little bit closer to that. And yeah, just the ways that your community shapes the expansiveness of your fantasies. Dear listener, you know I am always talking about how relationships shape our sense of self. And it also directly impacts what you can think about in terms of your fantasies, what fantasies feel okay, what fantasies feel forbidden, right? And so just a reminder, dear listener, speaking from personal experience, I will just say that if you date a man and he happens to tell you that you're too verbal, God forbid she goes and gets a doctor in clinical psychology and she's too verbal, or a man tells you that you're too sexual, because God forbid a woman liberate her own sexual power. Run far, far, far away from that man, okay? As Claire said, getting in trouble, all these moments are a reminder that you are on the path. And if you are scaring some men because you have a voice and because you are embodied, please, dear listener, just as much as I am reminding myself right now that is a sign that you are on the right path. All right, dear listener, if you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I want to say the biggest thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible to all people. So thank you. If you want to join the Patreon community, get exclusive access into my personal exploration and research, then you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchypodcast. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love. And let's tune in to today's episode. So then the first question I like to ask is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, thank you, Nicole.
Mhm.
So I am a dating, relationship, and sex coach, and I essentially help my clients to really release the shame,
Mm.
particularly around sex. I know myself, I was carrying a huge amount of sexual shame, and I know that you'll know this, but essentially sexuality and owning our sexuality is a part of who we are. And so I really support them in getting back to their true self and stripping back conditioning, the societal norms, and really helping them to awaken to who they fully are
Mhm.
and live a life by their terms.
Mm. Fun. You're in the right podcast space.
Oh, yes.
Hell yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey, how you've gone through this yourself and kind of where you're at today with it all.
Yeah, and I really walk my talk. I talk a lot about trusting your intuition, like getting out of your head.
Sure.
One thing I didn't ask you is if I'm allowed to swear.
Yes. There are
I
no rules in this
assume
space.
so.
Go for it.
I assume so, because I was
Yeah.
just about to drop an F-bomb and I was like, oh, you didn't check, did you?
Yes, yes, yes.
Brilliant. I assumed that, but I like to
Hmm.
ask. Yeah, essentially I help them fuck logic and embody unshakable trust. And I think, my journey has been very much about embodying that myself. And that's how I really feel like I can coach people authentically. I know how uncomfortable it is to let go of, what you thought you wanted, what you were led to believe, in
Hmm.
society, and actually follow what is your true path that doesn't bloody well make sense ever, and
Hmm.
just follow those little breadcrumbs. And I think, so often I see that people, will talk about they've got a really strong intuition, but it's actually stepping into that is the most important thing. That's when you really embody that trust. And so my life, I'll just give you a very short kind of
Sure.
like background
Yeah.
here, and I'm sure it will create some juicy questions. So I was married for 19 years with my ex-husband for 21. And in July 2021, I went through what I can only describe as a spiritual awakening,
Mm.
which awakened me sexually as well. And
Hmm.
suddenly it was like something had shifted in my body. And I actually felt that in this particular moment. I was actually in the middle of leading a retreat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was holding the space for all these women. The first retreat I'd ever led, previously I'd just been doing one-to-one coaching, but
Hmm.
I'd had what I'd say was divine guidance to lead a retreat.
Hmm.
And when you are fully aligned, things, and you take those steps that just appear, I tell you, like everything
Hmm.
just goes boom, boom, boom. And this is what happened with that. It was like I got the thought drop in, 48 hours, two women had paid in full. Within 10 days, it was full.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
then it was like, oh,
I'm doing this.
now I'm doing this. And what the fuck am I going to be teaching them? And it was like, yeah, well, you're not teaching them anything, you're coaching them, right? So all you're doing is you are showing up and they're going to bring the content, essentially. I learned this.
Hmm.
But anyway, what I didn't really realize is how transformational that would be for me, right?
Sure, sure.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
huge. And
Hmm.
I talk about my life from this point because this really was the point where I really woke up to
Mm.
myself
Mm.
and, navigated this awakening. And it was like this energetic shift in my body. I remember feeling that and then going to this state of I'm turned on. Like
Mm.
all the time,
Yeah.
like 24/7, no let up. It was like this insane energy. You're nodding like, yeah,
Yeah, your
you know
life.
this feeling.
Totally. Life is
It was
turning you
like,
on.
I'm alive, right?
Yeah.
I am alive. And I remember I got back to my family and my ex-husband didn't recognize me. He did not recognize the woman who walked back in the door. I don't blame him for that and the way that he reacted to me, because yeah, it was like I was being myself. And I think for years I recognized that I was shrinking to essentially keep him comfortable, right? Like I did that to myself. Like I fully own that, right?
Yeah.
And I think, we are wired to, or I certainly was wired to, or conditioned to be the good girl. Don't say anything nice. If you can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all. Oh, okay. So I just squished the pieces that me fully expressed, me wanting to maybe scream about something or be angry about something,
Right.
or share an opinion. Like, no, you don't do that. Right. So I was very much conforming for most of my life. And then this whole shift happened. And so many like really, really huge kind of like spiritually awakening moments happened from that point. And I guess on reflection, it was like my subconscious knew it was leaving soon. I didn't know when. I didn't have a plan in place to go, okay, I'm going to tell him on this day that I'm going to leave. I had recognized that I'd not been happy for a long time. I'd done a lot of work on myself. I'd worked with a lot of coaches and was really looking at my role in the relationship. And yeah, and then I got back from the retreat and it was literally 25 days later, I said, well, the words fell out of my mouth, I'm leaving you.
Yeah. How'd that land? Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Ooh.
It was, I mean, I will never forget the moment. I'm not going to lie. It was heartbreaking to
Totally.
witness the person that I'd married and still loved, the father of my children,
Of
right?
course.
I still cared for this man enormously, just was not in love with him anymore. And I could see how we were just not in alignment in so many areas of our lives. And I recognized I needed to just prioritize myself and say yes to me. But it was horrible to witness. Those first few days, I could see the pain he was in. He was heartbroken. And it was watching him go through these stages of grief. Like I knew what was going on. And there was nothing comfortable about it. But not for a second did I even consider changing my mind. Like just never even came into my thought process. It was like my soul was going, this is non-negotiable now. Like we've been telling you, we've been nudging you. And it's a bit like coming back to what I was talking about, your intuition. Like I think my intuition had been telling me for years. Well, I know it had. I'd ignored it.
Right.
And it was like, okay, right now, that's it now.
Yeah.
And this energy just gave me that courage to let those words fall out of my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, particularly for women, right? The people pleasing. We're all conditioned, like you said, you do be the good girl, you don't want to hurt other people, right? And just to even say those words, I can imagine just the conflict that was going on in your head and your body and going back and forth and back and forth. And once you say those words, they're out. There is no taking that back. And so even that moment of bringing that out, I could only imagine was such a significant experience. And I can, again, only imagine how many women are in relationships feeling that gut intuition that, this is no longer the relationship for me, but because of societal conditioning of you're supposed to stay with this person for the rest of your life. This is the one person my parents watched me get married, right? All of that sort of stuff that is kind of sitting there. And I think that when we have those gut moments of it speaking to us of saying, get out, when you don't listen, what ends up happening is your energy starts to fall. You're a little bit sadder. The world is not turning you on anymore, right? Like it is for us right now. We're like, hell yeah, I love life. It's that, oh, the vibration goes so much down. You get sick easier. All these other ways that the body and the soul is speaking to us, but it's so hard to jump into the unknown of what is on the other side of that statement of I want a divorce, right? Oof, oof.
Yeah, the fear is paralyzing. And
Totally.
that had played out through my mind, I'd say a couple of years before I'd actually said the words.
Right.
And I don't know if you know the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
Mm-mm.
Brilliant
I'll
book.
write it down. I'll write it down.
Oh, I read that book 4 times,
Whoa.
over the 18 months before I left.
It was speaking
And
to you, clearly.
it was so speaking to me. I was just looking if I had it on my desk. No, I don't. But it's like one of my most highlighted books. And there was some really powerful points in there that I often use in like keynote speeches that really spoke to me. And one of them was disappoint everyone else around you before you disappoint yourself.
That's hard. Because what does it mean to be in community? My brain goes like, what's compromise? What does it mean to like not, yeah. But particularly for women, I think given the people pleasing tendencies, like that's a really important message because it's not like we're balanced in this, right? We're frequently dropped on the face in the sense of we need to give to other people. So that message being so important. But then what does it mean to actually be in community with multiple partners? And I'm having to like navigate everyone's needs, Oof. That's where
Yeah.
my brain goes.
Sure, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And we always look at things based on our own situation, right?
Totally.
We reflect, and that's really powerful. But yeah, no, that really spoke to me, that line. And I think also the other piece in the book was all around like, what I was modeling to my children.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was two things. It was like my own happiness, and then it was like, okay, what am I modeling to them? Is this relationship that I desire for them? And it was a no. And yeah, once I really saw those two pieces, I think then it was like, yeah, the words were clearly coming. And I didn't know how they were coming, but they just came.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long was it in between that period and when you finally said the words?
Well, I'd probably been sitting on it, I'd been sitting on it for years, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then, I'd read the book, like 18 months prior to saying it. And then, had the actual shift in my body energetically. And that was about 3 weeks before the words fell out of my mouth. And I didn't know what the next step was. I remember my ex-husband saying, like, have you thought about how we're going to work everything out? Like, what's the plan? And I was like, don't know that bit. All I know is to tell you this. And yeah, it's like what you were saying, like it's stepping into the unknown, stepping into the fire. And yeah, we're scared because everything we've been taught is you get married, you stay forever.
Yeah.
And you think about the vows that most people make,
Yeah.
particularly if you've got married in a church.
Right.
It's till death us do part. And I think the other thing for me, I really noticed was I'd come from a broken family. So I never actually wanted that for my children.
Right.
Because I know what that felt like. But because I know what that feels like, actually, in a way, I think that's actually made me support them in a better way. I mean, only they'll be able to, well, they only know me as their mum, right? But I feel I have a lot of compassion for what they've had to go through.
Yeah, because you've done it yourself to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Mm.
And I'm just hearing though the importance of, like you said, is this a relationship that I would want them to see? Right. Of course, there's the complexities of the divorce and the separation and how that impacts them. But that other side of would you want this to be the model of love for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
tough.
it is. Yeah, it really is. And I think a lot has happened since.
Yeah, you're smiling. Yeah, you want to get to the juicy parts? Yeah.
A lot has happened since. And I
Right,
think,
yeah.
I see my children like, look at me, and some of the things they say to me now,
Mm.
it's like they've had this mum that was conforming for all those years, and then suddenly like she's totally taken the wheels off and
Yeah.
she is unleashed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my son said to me not long ago something like, Mum, like, do you do you, is it me, or are you actually aging backwards? I'm like,
Ooh.
I like that.
I
I'll
do like that
take that.
too. Yeah.
I'll take that. And I think, it is, I look back at photos and I look younger, and I think
Mm.
when you are doing that emotional work inside, you see it on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, joy. It's that life force, that joy, that vitality of feeling turned on by life that is speaking to you, that brings the smile,
Exactly.
the energy that you have, right? So
Yeah.
I'm curious, yeah, you're going through this difficult moment, the words fall out your mouth, right? You have that
Yeah.
unknown and you step into it. When do you start? Because I know it's not that simple of, from the difficult to the good, but when does it start to step into the space where you're feeling your life force kind of come back and the vitality that you're feeling now?
To be honest, like I think I was feeling that instantly, but was in like this process of
Mm,
still a little bit worrying about what people thought and things like that, right?
sure.
Because on paper, it appeared that, we had the dream life, we had the fairy tale. I
Mm,
even talk about that and go, I thought that's what I wanted, was the fairy tale. And I think back to when I was a child and I think about what I used to draw. I wasn't an arty person, right? I wouldn't put myself as an
mm-hmm.
arty person. I'm creative for sure.
Yeah.
But when it comes to drawing and coloring, that, yeah, I can color in the lines. I used to do that very well, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, I think about it and I think I always used to draw the same pictures,
Mm,
which was the house, the car, you know, the mum and the dad and the children. It was like, that's how much I believed that's what I want. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm really grateful for my family and that experience,
mm-hmm.
but now it's like, I want something different.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember what your question was.
That's okay. This is the unfolding. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the ways that we're so conditioned, right? We're so
Mm,
conditioned, and not just in love and relationships, other areas too, right? Like you go to
sure.
college, you go to university, you get this job, you do this sort of thing where you run the business and make the money and you go on vacation versus like an anarchist utopia of like what's actually beyond capitalism, right? Of dreaming of a whole different world of what could all of this system look like if we were beyond that. But given what we've been taught, conditioned, it's kind of limits our ability to dream. And so I feel the same way about relationships, right? We're told this is
Yeah.
the one way, this is what you do. And it's really hard to dream beyond that because we don't have models, we don't have examples of this sort of stuff.
Yeah. 100%. And it's true. It's, when we start to strip back that conditioning, and that's essentially the process I went through, was
Mm-hmm.
really like throwing everything up in the air, like everything, and going, that's not mine. That's not my
Yeah.
belief. That's, people fell away, obviously my marriage broke up, but the beliefs that I was carrying, particularly around sexuality, oh my gosh, like, and I've been dating for the past 2 years or so, and I really had to really look at these to
Totally.
be able to allow myself to have as much fun and freedom in that whole world. And I have. And I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Good.
helped me, not only explore and learn more about myself, it's helped me heal,
Oh yeah.
but it's also helped me to really get to a place now, and I'm so clear about what I want. And
Yeah.
that's exciting because I've allowed myself to fully embrace the dating world. Like, I've written a
Mm,
whole book on it.
nice.
So
Good. Yeah, I feel that.
so I think yeah, go on.
I just don't think there's no end, at
Mm.
least personally for me, to unpacking the ways that sex and these messaging and like I continue to think like, oh, I figured this thing out. I've deconstructed this, and then like another thing pops up, and I'm like, wow, okay, what's next, right? Like I just imagine we'll be spending the rest of our lives kind of digging up all of the systems and the way that those are so deep in our subconscious. Even for me, just having multiple partners and the idea of having sex with multiple people in a way that's not casual at all, right? Like to have
Yeah.
deep romantic relationships with multiple people and to want to be understood as like a divine whore in terms of all that I do, particularly given my purity culture background, knowing that I'm a feminist, knowing the Madonna whore
Mm.
complex has existed for so long of being unable to be both. And I'm sure maybe you could speak to that as a mother. Like, I'm not a mom, I'm not running
Mm.
the Madonna side as much, but I'm trying to like actively as a activist in the space, I'm trying to ride that center line of being like, yeah, I'm slutty.
Yeah, I love
Yes.
that, Nicole. Yes.
Yeah.
I
You
love how you
know?
described yourself there. A divine whore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rar.
One of the books literally in front of me is Ethical Slut.
Oh,
I
totally.
did a
The
I
Bible.
did a workshop actually called Own Your Slut.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah,
Absolutely.
I love this. So are you polyamorous? Is that right?
I would say I'm a relationship anarchist.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Have you heard of that
Yeah.
term?
No, I haven't. Tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's applying anarchist philosophies of deconstructing power systems to your relationships. And so what that ends up looking like is concepts like the relationship escalator. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, it's this idea of like there's a book called Getting Off the Relationship Escalator by
Oh.
Amy Graham, I think is the writer. So I did my dissertation on relationship anarchy. And so like just thinking about this concept of, if the relationship escalator is you date, you get married, you have the kids, you live together. I think live together would have came before that actually, but the
Mm.
escalator, right? So it's this
Sure.
concept
Yeah.
of like, ooh, what if we take a critical lens to that? And we take a critical lens to all these different ways that we have prescriptive ways of being in relationship and start to come from a space of what does it mean to look at each individual relationship and allow it to build on its own capacity rather than having these scripts or these boxes. And in the act of doing that, trying to do it in a way that's non-hierarchical as much as possible. Obviously, you're going to have prioritized people that you spend more time with than others, but not in this way of necessarily like hierarchical polyamory where there's veto powers and stuff like that. And so it ends up being like a pretty wide community of relationships I have that are all very different, but it feels very much so outside of the binary of monogamy or non-monogamy because my
Mm.
relationship anarchy also conceptualizes the importance of platonic connections in my world, in a way that polyamory kind of highlights the more sexual romantic and obviously platonic too. But again, then let's just get outside of that binary, and just see the world through a much more expansive way through relationship anarchy. But I'm obviously, I've drinking the Kool-Aid. I wrote the dissertation on it. I'm doing the research
Yeah,
on
I
it.
love that you did
So
that.
yeah,
That's incredible.
yeah,
I'd love to interview you for my podcast actually
yeah,
on
totally.
this
It'd be
and dive
fun.
into it deeper. That is really, yeah, amazing.
It's
Mm.
hard, I guess, trying to like deconstruct all of the messaging that is so deeply internalized. And so for me to
Yeah,
have, again, like there was a space of play partners like in the kink and
yeah,
BDSM community where that was kind of easy to conceptualize and having a close, I talk about it in orbits. Like I have a close orbiting partner and then some play
yeah,
partners that orbit at a wider circle. But then to
sure.
have like two really close orbiting partners and multiple play partners. I've just gone through so many different, oh, am I selfish? Am I hurting you? Are we all okay? You know,
Yeah.
just endless.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes,
Yeah.
you are stripping
Yeah.
back so much. That's so incredible. Yeah, I love the description of the relationship escalator because, yeah, that is. It's like what is portrayed, isn't it? And, there's this whole narrative, I think, when women get to, close to 30, and it's like society has this brainwashed narrative of, oh, you're still single,
Right.
you're going to be left on the shelf, have you thought about children, all that stuff. And it's like, maybe that isn't what they want, right? Maybe they want to fuck off and travel the world.
Totally.
Maybe they want to create multiple relationships like you're doing, like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think yeah, it's so, when you start to put a lens on this and you start to really free yourself and go, actually, what really feels exciting to me, and it changes and evolves, right?
Right.
I've
Right.
found that in
Yes.
the 2.5 years that I've been single,
Yeah.
I'm still single. I'm like, how am I
Mm-hmm.
still single? Claire, you chose that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm like, sometimes I'm just like a boyfriend. I'm
Sure.
like, but I know
Totally.
it's not going to be a traditional relationship. I know
Right.
that.
Right.
And I play very much in sex positive communities.
Fun. Yeah.
That really vibes with me. I like people who are really open and expressed and can talk about sex over breakfast. Like, yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Totally. Mm-hmm.
So every single guy I meet, very much is, you know, looking at something non-monogamous, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. And
Great.
that, can be all sorts of different flavors and
Right.
varieties, right? There's a whole
Totally.
spectrum.
Totally.
But I think, yeah, it's about the communication between that partnership and whatever is created.
Hmm. Yeah, and we're at a very unique time in history when we think about it, right? 100 years ago, at least in the States, Margaret Sanger was being arrested for talking about contraception, right? It's been 100 years that, so you and I having this conversation about not just contraception, but pleasure. Right.
Yes.
And we're not being arrested. We might be judged professionally, by whoever, but no longer are we fearing the threat of the carceral state, which is a very different space. And when we think about women's liberation in terms of pay, obviously the pay gap still exists, right? But we're in a different world now where I don't need to get married to be able to have financial success. In fact, maybe shit, if someone marries me and we get divorced, I might be giving them alimony from my money, you know what I mean, as a doctor to be, right? So, like, it's just a whole different world where in the past, like, women truly didn't even have this space of liberation to live on their own, let alone get a credit card in
Yeah.
the States. That was in the 70s. In the
Oh
70s?
yeah.
Fucking crazy.
1975 here.
Yeah, that was 50 years ago that women could have credit
Mhm.
to make large purchases. So just in
Mhm.
terms of women's history generally and relationships, we have no idea what women want, right? Like, we are stepping into a space where women are getting this choice now as we're deconstructing this to sit and be like, "Oh, what actually do we want?"
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a researcher, I'm really curious.
Yeah, and I find, when I have potential clients come to me, obviously that's one of the first questions I'll ask them. Honestly, most people do not know, not just women, men too.
Right.
But yeah, I think, with the conditioning, women very much so have not had that choice available because they've been so dependent on the man, and that has repressed their sexuality big time.
Oh, totally. Yes. Men control mine. She's mine. She's mine, right? Any idea of going out is really destabilizing for
Mm.
a lot of men. right? And of course, it's also destabilizing for all people in terms of learning to feel secure in the attachments of freedom and all of that. But particularly for the social conditioning of men, there's a lot of messaging around that is your possession, that is your person, that is your wife, your girlfriend, your whatever, and you need to satisfy her. And so if she goes out to other people, you're failing. And that messaging, I guess, is across all genders too. I think a lot of women would feel that way too. It's part of the social conditioning that if you have other people, it means you're somehow failing your partnership, which is funny to me because we don't do that with friendship, right? We never do that with friendship. I don't ever look at my friends and be like, you have multiple friends? That means that I'm not satisfying all of your relational needs. Like,
Yeah.
Sorry, Claire. It's just ridiculous. It's really, really hard for me to sit with.
Oh, I'm so with you. And I think it's funny, I had this conversation. I've done a lot of work with sexological body workers over the last couple of years, and
powerful stuff.
You are
powerful. I've had some experiences.
Yes.
Very powerful.
Oh my gosh. I just love it. Yeah, it's been incredible. And just helped my body to release so much. And my God, fast way to get all your patterns show up, right?
Yeah, caretaking immediately. I must caretake for this person. Wait, no, you're paying. Oh, okay. Okay. Receive, Nicole, receive.
Exactly, receive. But I remember having this conversation with one of my practitioners around ownership, and we were talking about, like, if there is we were talking about how, I don't want to be owned by a man, but there's something quite sexy about being owned in the bedroom. So you can play with that in different ways, if that's like your kink and your turn on, and not necessarily see it as taking your freedom away, or because you're not anyone's, you are you, and no one has that control or power over you. There was a post I started writing this morning actually that really links into this, which is about men letting their women flirt with anyone, because if there's a problem with that, it's nothing to do with the woman, right? I know that was a big part of how I was really suppressing myself. I'm a massive flirt.
Which makes me so sad. What the hell? You're talking about, again, I support all relational dynamics. People who want to do monogamy, beautiful. You should be able to experience joy and connection with other people and flirt and know that it's not going to go anywhere because you've made a commitment to someone. And that's okay. Like, what a wild world that we repress our joy in conversation, just to be excited and interested and show like joy with that person. Like, if you've made a commitment of monogamy, beautiful. Don't go beyond that, right? But like, what a crazy idea. And then even for me to like take it further, go kiss the guy, go have sex with him, go have the vacation with the other guy, right? Like, there's so much possibility of your life force here that gets repressed. And I appreciate what you said about the belonging, right? Like, I love in the bedroom to play with the belonging. I mean, whether it's a DS dynamic, right? And I'm the sub, and it's a master, and we have that sort of like, I'm, consensually giving my power to you in this moment. That's a deep belonging. Other times of even more vanilla experiences of like, tell me I'm your girl, tell me I'm your woman. And like, I say that knowing that we have multiple, but I am their woman, right? And in the same
that moment
way, and in general too, because when I say my friends, like my friends, these are my friends. There is a possessive in that. These are my friends, but in the possessiveness of belonging, there is no control. Like, there is a possessiveness of belonging. You belong in my orbit. You are a part of my world, but I don't restrict who else you talk to. And so it's like, I am your woman, to claim that. And a woman who has the freedom to fly and comes home, like, I don't like this metaphor because it makes me be a dog, right? But, or an animal, right? But like, there are animals we have that have like outdoor relationships, and they go and fly, and they come back, they go and scourge out there, and they come back. That's my cat, but it goes outdoors. Totally. So like I need a better metaphor than that, but like I keep thinking about that as like as the yes and of belonging and freedom at the
Yeah,
same time.
I really relate to that. I remember a sex coach asked
Mhm.
me that question
Mm.
last year when I was heartbroken over some guy, and he said to me, Claire, are you a dog or a cat?
Mm.
Because I think I was, the way I was talking to him was like, yeah, this is going to be the one. And
Oof.
he was like, are you sure that you're looking for monogamy? And I was like, I think maybe, because I think there's still a part of
Yeah,
that's what I,
sure.
have grown up with. And so, but I know that that's not what I'm creating.
I
But yeah, he was
know.
like, are you a dog? Are you going to be a dog or a cat? And I was like, oh, a cat.
Oh, hell
A
yeah.
cat has way more fun, and that
Yes.
sense of independence and freedom, and yeah, go out to play. And
Hmm.
but obviously within the boundaries of that dynamic. So no, I think it's a brilliant way to describe it. But
Totally.
going back to the the mine, she's mine, and that
Hmm.
very conditioned kind of toxic masculinity kind of ownership piece,
Hmm.
all of it comes back to abandonment,
Hmm.
the fear of abandonment, the fear of being alone.
Yeah.
And very much my journey, funnily enough, in my marriage I always felt really super secure. As soon as I left, my abandonment wound came straight up as soon as I stepped
Sure.
into dating, and literally, wow, just healing layers and
Oh,
layers. Like,
yeah.
whoa.
Yeah.
But most people carry an abandonment wound, and
Oh, totally.
fear rejection, fear being alone. And as human beings, we are wired for connection, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you think you're secure and then they don't text back for a few hours and you're like
Yeah.
spiraling. You're like, damn it, I thought I had this under control.
Yeah,
I don't.
gonna sit on my freaking hands,
Totally,
sitting on my hands, I'm not
totally not gonna
texting.
send the next text. Nope, nope. We're gonna do
But
something else.
energetically,
Yeah,
you're
totally.
you're fucking
Spiraling.
giving it all power, and it's like, oh right, okay, I can see what's going on here.
Totally.
But yeah, it doesn't go away, obviously, but the power
Yeah.
is seeing it. And I think
Mhm.
yeah, I think actually it's a lot of, I see a lot of women in particular, not stepping into dating because they fear the rejection.
Mm,
And yeah, there's so much joy to be missed.
totally.
Joy, connection. Like, I meet incredible men, incredible.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I love learning about people. They help me learn about
Oh,
myself.
yeah.
And yeah, I'm going on a date tomorrow,
Oh,
actually.
good. I'm excited for you. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited. I've not been on a date for a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's come
Yeah.
through the sex positive community. And I think,
Love that.
just the chats we've had already is very much like we're very much aligned,
Good.
and talking about, we both want almost like something long term, but not within the constraints of what we've been taught.
Great. Good
Don't know
pairing.
what the details are of that yet, and that's okay. It'll unfold, right?
Right. Theoretically
But
over
I know
years, right? If it goes
what
well, theoretically over years, right? It will change.
exactly,
There might be periods of
exactly.
fidelity sexually. It might be periods of open. Like I wish people could get more comfortable with that, right? Like we're talking just theoretically with this date, but that you're gonna have tomorrow.
Mm,
But I wish all people could be in that more space of like, hey, there might be times where I'm having sex with one person because
mm.
you're in grad school, you're
Sure.
busy, you don't have the time, and then there's
Yeah,
other periods of your life where maybe it's more open, and then maybe it closes back again and opens. Like, what would it mean to actually be in more of a flow state with these things
flow.
rather than these boxes? Because frequently people do the same
Yes.
thing with non-monogamy, this box of like, I'm here now, I'm doing this, it's not
Mm.
feeling good, but I'm doing this. And it's like, you don't have to do this, just so you know. Like
No.
you could go back, you could come back into it
Yeah.
again. you know, like just the freedom. I wish people would feel that
Mm.
freedom with this rather than boxes in either way.
I agree. And I think it's so tuning into how you feel, isn't it? It's living in your body and, you know, getting straight out of your head.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to feel into that and let go of the fact, you know, the people pleasing and all of
Right.
that.
It's hard. It's
Mm.
hard. And when you were talking earlier about the ownership thing, I think a lot of that also
Yeah.
comes from capitalism, right? If we think about, you know, there's a lot of history on the concepts of marriage and ownership really starting when we started to have private property, right? This is my private property. This is my wife. This is my heir and my son, and they're going to get this, and no one else is going to get this, right? This idea of control and the way that that continues to influence our psyche in terms of resources, right?
Mm.
This is my person. They're my emotional support. This is my one resource. I could never share my
Yeah.
money with other people because people are just going to take it, right? And that's kind of where even the concepts of relationship anarchy and mutual aid, both financially, of like we could share resources to work together. Also, we could share emotional resources to work together, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's so deep, these ideas of scarcity rather than abundance. And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you know, love is abundant, time and energy are not, though, right? Time and energy are not. Your attachment to multiple people, I can't know everyone's like full story, so there is limitations on the abundance mindset of all of it. But I think that a lot of the internalization of capitalism and ownership is so deep in our relationships, paired with, of course, this existential longing for security. We want to know that we have community, and that's where I'd be curious, like even when you were talking about being single, like even just a
Yeah.
reframe, like how many beautiful relationships do you have, Claire? Like I'm gonna make an assumption since you have kids that you have
Yeah.
more than one, right? You're not single. You're in a depth of
True.
all of these, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
how beautiful.
Yeah, it's true. And actually, so I've just moved house and it's been quite a stressful experience. I've moved a
Sure.
lot,
It's
but
hard.
this one was particularly epic, probably because I didn't know where I was going until 24 hours before I was leaving. So
Oh
I
no.
was all packed. Everything was packed. Didn't know where I was going to be living. It was either going all to storage or was I going somewhere? And
Crazy.
landed on this pad. Like I know that it was like, yeah, just divine intervention for sure. One of the things I recognize, like in the last few months, is like I've been gathering these like
Mm,
people around me,
yeah.
and I'm going to do like this little thank you event this weekend to just thank people for their just their love and support. And you know, whether that's they've been there to support me crying on their shoulder or like come and helped me with something. And I think,
Hmm.
yeah, I recognize I am surrounded by an
Yeah.
abundance of incredible relationships that I've created,
Hmm.
as well as my children. And yeah, so
How does it feel to just sit in that for a moment? I think so many people could find
mm,
so much benefit from just sitting in that for a moment rather than the idea of the single and who's the one and the thing. Like, look
true.
at all those beautiful relationships you have that care for you. And I've got a vibrator at home. I don't know. I could go for months without someone else. You know
Oh,
what I
oh
mean?
yeah, me too. It's permanently plugged in the
Totally
wall.
fine. Yeah, exactly. Look at all these beautiful relationships
Yeah,
I have. We're fine. We're good, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, it's really important. I think, you know, I like that perspective, Nicole. I think it's
Yeah.
important to really see that and see, you know, we are often, you know, very well supported, and it's almost like this attachment to what we think getting that love is, when actually we've got love all around us. And
Right.
even just like moving in 2 days I got invited to a Galentine's event
Ooh, fun.
with my new neighbor, my brand new neighbor. And then met a whole group of women who I'll call them single, right? Because I don't know
Mm-hmm.
another term in this
Yeah,
moment, but like people in the same situation as me.
totally.
And it's like, wow, like
Isn't that beautiful?
I'm so supposed to be here. Yeah,
Yeah.
really lovely. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think A man is just a bonus on top.
Totally. I don't, and sometimes we don't even need them, right? Like my Valentine's Day celebration is this Friday, and I'm having like a
Oh
couple
yeah.
of femmes and women co-top me at a dungeon, right? Like there's no boys allowed. Like I specifically texted the group chat. I was like, no boys, just femmes and women. And so I'm gonna have like a whole
I love
sexual
it.
Valentine's Day experience that has no men. No men.
Amazing.
You know, like, well, we don't
Amazing.
need them. We don't need them. It's 2024.
No.
You know, like
Oh, 100%. 2024 is the year of abundance. And
totally.
in whatever form you desire.
I want to be clear. I have male partners that I love dearly. I want to be very clear. But sometimes we just need a Galentine's Day. You know what I mean?
I love that. I
Yeah.
love your style of Galentine's.
Thank you.
Mine was not that style,
Okay.
but
Not yet.
not yet. But they did have some really fun questions, which
Ooh.
I really
Yeah.
loved. They didn't know anything about me, right? So one of the questions was, tell your funniest sex story. And I was like, oh shit, I've
Which
just
one?
met these people.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. Which fucking one shall I tell
Totally.
them? Oh my God, I've got loads. I told them a whole story. Like, yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant
Did you
fun.
shock them yet? Like that's my thing where like when I get invited to something, I have to do like a paradigm check because like in the kink world where I'm co-topping at a dungeon, you know, I could like you said, talking about sex at breakfast, I could be like, "Oh, we were fisting, blah 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 blah, rope shibari, like blah blah blah," and then I have to like, "Oh, okay, this person's not in this community. If I do this, this actually might be very dysregulating and activating for them in ways that
Yeah,
they have no idea about." And so I'm constantly kind of checking of like who's my audience
yeah.
because otherwise I'll freak some people out. So I'm curious if you had to kind of do a little bit of a check.
It there was one moment
Yeah.
because I was sharing a story about what happened when I was in India recently,
Okay.
and I had a lot of fun, let's just say.
Good.
And one of the women did say, you could have got arrested for that. And I said, yes, I am very aware,
Mm.
but I didn't. And yeah, it was probably deemed not what you would normally go and do in
Mm.
India. But I think, I'm very much in tune with myself, and
Good.
it's like checking in with what felt right in the moment. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something quite nice about, I know that that's one of my kind of kinks, is doing things that are slightly risky.
Fun. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like that's actually a thing for me.
Right.
So I got to experience that.
Good.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Um
And I think it's so crazy too, just when I think about the psychology of all of it, right? Like relationships being mirrors, right? So I've had so many different
mm,
experiences like this. And I think this is a good example of it, right? That person goes, well, hey, you could have got arrested, versus a person looking at you and going, Claire, that was so hot. Oh my God. Like, yes, like, way to go. Like, do it. Right. And, or if now I would have met you in this moment and been like, well, that's bad, Claire. How dare you? Right. When it's so hard when we're moving through the world and looking into a mirror, a relationship,
mm,
and we see how they react. It's like just inevitable human nature that evolutionarily we want to be in relationship. It's safe in relationship, and we're
mm,
social beings. And so when we look into that mirror and someone goes, that's fucked up, we immediately feel that and go, oh, is it? Oh no. Am I bad? Am I going to be ostracized? Oh no.
yeah,
Versus the partner who goes, oh yeah, yeah. And that is something I've continually moved through of having to be really conscious who I tell,
mm,
not just because it activates them, right? Like what I was saying
sure,
before, but also because of their response and the way it impacts me. And so if I tell someone about
yeah,
a kink fantasy I have and they go, that sounds fucked up, then I feel like I'm doing something fucked up. And I don't need that in my life.
shame, yeah,
Yes. Yes. So I have to be really careful about like who I
sure,
tell these things to, because otherwise
yeah,
it requires so much strength to really like stand in your truth and be like, cool, I got that you feel that way, but no, like that's hard. That's really hard.
yeah. I think it's true, isn't it? I think, and when you are in this world of work, like, we tend to be quite liberated and can be quite vocal about it. But I think, yeah, absolutely checking in and within my personal relationships, yeah, I definitely know like who are my people
Right.
that are not going to be freaked out or judge me in a certain way, and then causing me to do a huge amount of inner work, which was probably unnecessary if I maybe didn't even tell them.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Communities, they shape our identity, they shape our reality. And that's how we got into the problem in the first place, right? At least for me, coming from purity culture, Christianity, that was reinforced
Okay.
by all of the people around me, all of my friends that were getting married to pastors, all of that, right? So when you look around and that's your world, that's your
Yeah.
world. And so there has been such a shifting of my community, and it's continually shifting as I step even into more,
Mm.
particularly, I want to be very clear, empowerment for women, right? Like, I
Mhm.
need other powerful women around me who look and say, yeah, I topped that man. I blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
look at them like, yes, versus like, oh, I don't know what to do in the bedroom. I can't make phone calls to order food on my own. My boyfriend does that. Like,
Yeah.
I need strong women around me. Okay. I want to be
Yeah.
very clear.
Yeah, 100%,
Um,
100%. Because, well, I think when we are being this way, there's a great quote. It came to me earlier actually when we were talking.
oh,
It's come
cool.
back again. You probably are familiar with it, the Marianne Williamson quote. And it's all the essence of it. I'm not going to say it, it's a
Sure.
really long quote, but the essence of it is, when we shine our light, we give others permission to really step into theirs.
Yeah. And then the important part of the people who aren't tapped into their light feel insecure, jealous, angry at the fact that you're shining so bright. And that would have been me, right? I would have looked at myself and been like, who the fuck is this girl thinking that she's just
Oh, I
some
was that
badass
too.
bitch? Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I try to watch when I get that response from people. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. I wonder where they're at internally. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah. I see it a huge amount,
sure.
particularly when I step into spaces like gyms,
Yeah, owning your body and your
and
power.
I'm less own. I'm like, give zero fucks. I'll
Yeah,
dance. I'll do whatever feels good for me, and
sure. Good.
it's it's not conforming in any way.
Hmm.
And I've also seen it, interestingly, in play parties
Yeah, say more.
where, you know, I'm quite confident in who I am,
Yeah.
and that is felt. And I think when, you know, I've noticed it more interestingly with younger women, and
Mm,
which is curious really. But it's almost like, I think what I'm seeing is like it's their abandonment wounds showing up and they feel threatened by me. So almost like will grab the guy, won't let me near them, when it had been a conversation that was okay, and then suddenly it changes. And I'm
yeah.
like, okay, I can see where you're at and I get it. Like,
It's hard,
but it's
man.
interesting when
Yeah.
it's in that kind of community, because, I think you think it may be more conscious, but I think, they can be very hedonistic and those kind of events. And if you're not really intentional and you're not really clear about what you want to get out of it and your boundaries, like, yeah, it can be a bit messy.
Totally. Absolutely. And a lot of this journey for me has been so like values based of I know kind of like you were saying, right? Where you're like, there's these days of wondering if monogamy and the romance fetish, and that path could be the thing. But in my body, I know it's not. Like in my gut, in the
Yeah.
same way that my gut has been speaking me into the past, it says no, there is more that is possible. And you are leaping into the unknown of that because there are no pioneers out there. Granted, The Ethical Slut, I've read their books. I fucking love
Mm,
Dossie and Janet,
mm,
right? Like they are an
mm,
example, but like,
mm.
I need more. And so it's a joy to be a part of those
Yeah.
examples as much as you are in the space with me, right now. And so all the people that are listening in being like, wow, these people, these women are running the game. Like, yes, we are. But it's scary
Yeah.
because there is no examples of this, right? And so we're moving into it.
Yeah.
My gut says that, but I've had so many experiences where my value system of moving in this direction is met with my attachment wounds and fears and like conditioning. And so they come up right next to each other, which reminds me a lot of rock climbing. I'm a rock climber, right? I'll be doing hard routes. Yeah, I know I want to get to the top. And then my brain goes, you're going to fall. Oh no, you can't do this. Oh no. And I have to actively sit with that and say, okay,
sure,
deep breath. I'm going to keep going. And that directly parallels everything that I've done in this space. And I specifically remember, so I built all of my own individual relationships. I'm having this one individual relationship with this beautiful woman that I adore dearly, this beautiful man that I adore dearly, and they're both connected through me. They're not connected together. And I was thinking, great, what a beautiful way to have my first threesome, right? Like I'm connected to him, I'm connected to her, versus like having a first threesome with maybe my male partner's other partner, a metamor. The power dynamics are different there, right? Where I felt like, cool, I'm really secure. I really love this woman. I really love this man. Let's bring it all together, right? And God damn it. The sex part was great. I'll be very clear. Yeah. The sex part, lovely. Loved that. Great. But the second that we were all together and he starts touching her hand, he starts just gently rubbing her hand, I lose my shit, Claire. I go, oh, look at the nice shiny thing that he's touching. Isn't she beautiful? He doesn't even want me. Like, these are the thoughts going, he doesn't even want me anymore. I'm just boring. The new thing's right here. God damn it. And all of that goes through my head, right? So I'm thinking like you and those stories, being at play parties and I've been there, and it was like, God damn it, this was my part, like my female partner, my male partner, like I felt so grounded in that power, and yet still I'm just like, oh, look at her, she's so beautiful, I'm nothing, like
oh, I think how incredible though to have that experience, because you could then go, great, because you're conscious and you can go, oh wow, like you see it. So I'm like, oh
totally,
yeah.
And I keep climbing, right? Just like I see in when I'm climbing I can't do this. We've had more experiences now, and you know what doesn't happen now? That. But the first time, holy shit, and it took a really intense grounding in myself to be like, no, I'm beautiful. I know what I bring to the table, and no one else is me.
100%. That is powerful.
Yes, it is.
That is powerful. Yeah. Celebrating you, like really finding the space to actually find those words to lean on, because it's so easy to go into the rabbit hole and actually make you could have made a complete fucking mess of the whole what might have been that delicious time. But I mean, it's like jealousy it's a big part of the condition. It comes back in its ownership piece, right? It's all deeply interconnected. A guy I was dating actually who was in an open marriage. Oh my, jealousy came up
on which part, you or the
both sides. But he was, because he'd been in this open marriage for 10 years, way more experience of this. And like suddenly, like I'd ask him what, he'd message me and I'd say, oh, what are you up to today? And then he'd tell me how he was doing something with his wife and then running a bath. It was small things like, I'm running her a bath. I'm like, fucking hell, are you? What? Like, I want someone to run me a bath. Triggered it's and intense. Activated me big time. And we had this incredible conversation about it. I was like really upfront with him, and we talked about all of that stuff, and he's like, like, how could you use that to get really turned on about it?
I love that.
Like,
kinky.
next time we meet, like, could you bring that into a session? And then vice versa. Like, I remember telling him I was going on a date, thinking he would be all cool with that, right? Because he's been doing this for so long. He was like, oh, I'm feeling really jealous. And I was like, well, that's interesting, isn't it? What are
Mhm.
you going to do with that then? He was like, wow, I'm excited that I'm feeling jealous, because
Yeah.
I feel like there's something juicy here. It's like,
Right.
I remember him saying to me, it's like it's showing you're alive, right? And we've been wired
Mhm.
to label different emotions and feelings as good or bad. And it's like,
Mhm.
actually, how about seeing it as this is just what the feeling state, this is an emotion, and not, instead
Totally.
of labeling it as a bad or
Right.
good, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. And there's so much erotic nature to play with that too, of the jealousy, because it's a yearning, right? It's a yearning, it's a desire. And so, how can we channel that then to play with it? Of you're right, I do want this, and I feel secure enough, key piece, that
Mm,
I'm not going to act out and start screaming, crying, etc. Right? I talked to Jessica Fern, polysecure.
yeah.
Yeah, and we were just talking about the paradigms of attachment. And when we think about
Mm,
childhood, children often going through a similar experience when the parents decide to have a second child.
yeah, of course, of course.
So thinking about
Yeah.
all of us, we're like all relationally going through that experience as adults. And I am so excited for your kids and the future generations that because of people like Jessica Fern, the Ethical Slut, this podcast, right? All these other spaces where
Yeah.
like the collective consciousness is changing, where I don't think that they're gonna go through such a significant deconstruction like you did, like I'm doing, right? And even generations above us had to do or actively
Yeah.
trying to do. But we're all kind of going through that experience of what does it mean to still feel secure when there's another relationship, just like the child, right? Second relationship, your parents still love you. But at that moment, you're like, what? How? How? And I told my mom, quite literally, I
Yeah.
said to her, put that baby back in your belly. It was funny. We talked about that recently over the holidays. And I
Oh
was
my
like, oh,
gosh.
yeah, I've definitely said that one in non monogamy, like, no, take it out. I don't want it anymore, But like, then think about the beauty
Yeah,
of what the dynamic is that I have a sister and a
of
brother and these other
course.
spaces that, like, we had to adjust to. But once we did, wow, look at the fullness. And of course, Jessica also put in the great comment too of thinking about, and at some point, if you have so many kids, you actually do not get your relational needs met, right? Again, there is a limitation to our time, energy, and these dynamics of having multiple people. But that paradigm of having to find security in the newness of a new relationship is uncomfortable, but absolutely possible. Absolutely
Yeah.
possible.
I really heard there like the shift from, that scarcity, how could you love her, her or him, as well as me? Like, how is that possible, right? To this like abundance, which is obviously, what you've completely created, because there is an abundance of everything in the world,
Yeah.
particularly love, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I know,
Mm,
but that's hard to trust into and lean into. And for me, it's taken a lot of time. Time. Like time has been the answer of because
yeah.
after that threesome experience, for a
Okay.
few days afterwards, then I was like, well, so is he gonna secretly start texting her? Is he secretly gonna start
Oh,
running off with her? Like, oh no, oh no. And it took time to realize, oh no, that was actually just a play experience. She has her full world of partners. He has her full world of partners. Everything's actually stable. Like, we're not actually gonna shift. We could just play and have this quote unquote board game night,
mm,
with a friend, whatever we want to like think about it as, right? And it didn't mean that the whole
mm,
world shifted, but I had to have that experience of going
of
through
course.
that difficult fear of what does this mean to now sit like, no, we can do this and we can have other partners in our world. And it actually, there is some level of shift, right? That was a play experience. It's very, a singular moment. And we can have these other moments of building relationship. And there is change. Don't get me wrong. There's change. Again, because right,
Of
limited
course.
time and energy. And if you're trying to have multiple close, like that's gonna be a change. Again, like having two kids, it's a change. But once you get to the stability of it,
Yeah.
juicy, very juicy.
Mm, yeah, I can, only imagine what a huge growth, uncomfortable time that was, because it's not just a situation. It's how our heads then go into the whole stories of the what
Totally.
if scenarios. And it's like, oh,
Yep.
but
Yep.
yeah, powerful in cementing and anchoring that security in yourself, and realizing that that was just a lot of stories.
Right.
And we do it with everything, don't we?
And we can't blame ourselves, right? I mean,
No.
shit, any rom-com I watch goes, if you fall in love with the second person, leave the first because you never really loved them, right? Like this stuff it's not even my choice, right? Like this is so deep in my psyche. This is where I talk about it as like classical conditioning, right? Like the
Yes.
stimulus of watching my partner touch the woman's hand, my brain immediately classical conditioning, all the rom-coms. He doesn't love you, she's
Yeah.
more exciting, all of the years of women put against one another for competition.
Oh
Boom,
yeah.
boom, right there, right? And that wasn't even my free choice. Like that is deep in the unconscious.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's huge. I love the work you're doing.
Thank you.
I
And see what I find is really funny too is now as I'm connecting with these people and they want to take me home to their mothers, then I'm like, oh shit, I am a divine whore. Like that's where then I'm like, what are you gonna tell your mom? Like, oh my God, if she's not a feminist, this might be complicated, you know? That's the societal conditioning too. It's like tough.
Sure.
So then I want to be quiet. I start to think about that. I connect with them, and then I'm like, what if their mom listens to the podcast? And I start to want to be, I can't do that, Claire.
Interesting to notice.
Yes, isn't it?
Yeah. What about your family? Are they aware of your
Yeah, so
relationship
the fun
situation?
complicated things of all of that are that my family is Mormon, and so when I first came out as queer, I kind of like wrecked the whole thing in their paradigm already. Like in terms of doing the bad thing, in terms of doing the wrong thing, and them having to sit with that I was like, cool, I guess I've already ripped this band-aid off. Just so you know, now I'm also non-monogamous, right? Or exploring multiple people. And at that point, maybe particularly with Mormonism and its history of multiple polygamy, which is very different than what I do, but like that was somehow more okay than queerness. And then at that point, I was just like, God, I'm already out here, and I think I do get the fun getting the doctorate in clinical psychology and my path being about sexual trauma, and that's what brought me into the field and is why
Sure.
I started all of this work, and then getting into a space of
Right.
what does sexual trauma healing look like into pleasure has been my research and my world, and by association reading The Ethical Slut and all these things, right, which has taken me on this path. So I do have some level of like, this is my research, mom, which gives me some level of grounding in it that she's learned to get more comfortable with. But I think definitely like ripping off the band-aid by being bad from queer kind of gave me the space to kind of say like, okay, well, fuck it, I'm about to go 0 to 100. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think just, being able to just express it is just like really deeply important,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? How's it been for you? I mean, I want to hold space for the mother experience. I'm not a mom. I cannot imagine,
Yeah.
given the Madonna and the horror complex, just like how other people would look at you as a mom that does this stuff. Like, it's unique.
Yeah, well, I've definitely had the system push back on me big
Sure.
time. I don't want to actually talk about what situation showed
Mm,
up, but
yeah.
do you know what? What I realized is it just showed me I'm on the right track.
Good. Love that for
Didn't
you.
feel like that in that moment, right? It took a little bit of time to go, and this is what I need for my protection moving forwards to be able to really do this work.
Yeah.
And when I release my book, that is gonna be brushing up against what we've been taught and up against, societal conditioning. So yeah, it was kind of like I'm taking it as almost like a moment in time to just tell me what I need for the future.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like, being a mum and speaking to that, and I'm very open with my kids about the fact that I'm dating, and often, I'm dating multiple men, and
Mm-hmm.
I have books around that are all about, the ethical sluts, and I have
Right.
another one which is called What is Monogamy, I think it's
Mm.
called.
Nice.
And I've shown them that, and I try and gently bring it into conversation, and they know that I've played with women as well.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is, this generation coming through are much more open in terms of like sexuality and
Yep.
genders. And
Yep.
I remember when I first told them about my female experience, it was almost like they were just like, yeah, and
Yeah, exactly. And if you told your mom, it was probably a very different experience, right?
well, actually it wasn't.
Oh,
I
good. I
tell
love
you one
that. I love
thing
that.
is my mum, I honestly, I have thrown so much at her in the last 2.5 years. And one thing I say I am so grateful for is I have a mum who just meets me with unconditional love, no judgment,
Beautiful. Love that.
because she would never go and do half these things that I've done in my life,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And even like before I got married, I was pretty wild and free
Sure.
then,
Good.
right? And all, like got into all sorts of things. And I know my mum has never experienced half of, not even half of
Yeah.
what I've experienced, but she always just meets me with unconditional love. And so I
Mm.
told her about, this woman that I'd fallen in love with, and she was just like, doesn't change anything, you're still my daughter
Oh,
and I love you,
yeah.
And my kids were very much the same. It's like, mum, it doesn't change anything,
Beautiful.
and I think when you start to realize, or I hope I've helped them realize, that love is love. It doesn't matter about what gender that person is. And I actually grew up thinking I was 100% straight, so
Mm-hmm.
suddenly I was like,
Oh
that's
no.
interesting.
Totally. Totally.
Didn't see that one coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized that I was carrying a lot of shame around it, and I didn't
Mm.
speak to anyone about it for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I recognized, oh, there's shame. I grew up in the 70s and
Right.
80s,
Right.
and in
Very
a very
different.
small town in the UK. I did not know anyone who was gay or lesbian.
Mm.
There would have been, but
Totally.
no one had come out that I knew. And I think in those days, they were very much ostracized, really.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was unconsciously probably sitting with me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think I had all of these crazy thoughts, right, around, if I tell my female friends, are they going to think I fancy them? Like, all
Yeah.
this stuff was like playing out in
Mm-hmm.
my head.
Totally.
I was like, oh, wow, this is like, whoa, the
Deep.
stories. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I'm really open about it now. And
Good.
I've had different, experiences with the females as well. And
Mm-hmm.
that's been really fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, totally different.
Yes. Absolutely.
Totally different.
Different sides
And
of myself. Yeah, come out in different dynamics.
yeah.
Makes sense.
And I feel like actually like really blessed to have had
Oh
those
yeah.
experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Expansive
It's living.
experiences. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
living full out.
Totally. Yeah, good.
Mm,
I'm so happy to hear your life
yeah.
force, like, and the joy that is coming to you with this. And I think that I'm so sorry to hear about the experiences with the systems. And also,
Mm.
every good feminist gets in trouble, right? Every good feminist of her era gets in trouble. And so we're doing it right when we're pushing the edge and getting in trouble. Again, Margaret Sanger being arrested like 100 years ago for contraception, right? Like, all of us in our little experiences here are creating ripples to change the
Yeah.
system collectively right now. And so I hope you're getting in trouble. I hope I continue to
It's
get in
true.
trouble, right? Rar, just keep going and changing it,
Yeah,
because
you are on the right track.
right, I want future generations to have the joy
Yeah.
that we're feeling in our bodies of intimacy and connection and play and
Yeah.
eros, and like those are divine experiences that I hope that we can be a part of through a conversation like this, to shake the system, make people uncomfortable, think about this stuff. And I know that the future generations, just like we're picking up the torch from them, they'll pick up the torch and keep running in ways that we can't even imagine right now.
True.
Yeah.
Mm.
I want to hold a little bit of space too as we come towards the end of our time. I always like to take a deep breath with my guest. And then I like to check in and see if there's anything else that maybe you wanted to share with the listener. Otherwise, I can guide us towards 2 closing questions.
No, I feel I'm ready for those questions, actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. So then the first question I've been enjoying to ask is, if you could close your eyes and go back to a time earlier in your journey, maybe this is when you're saying, I want a divorce. Maybe this is at a play party, wherever you see yourself. I'm curious, what would you say to your younger self?
Probably one of my biggest learnings through this whole journey has been to really let go of almost like a time span on something, on a relationship, and just enjoy the connection for however long that is, whether that's 5 days, 5 months, 5 years, whatever. Yeah, that's been really powerful, to just let go of that. As much as I desire something regular and long term, it's like, but actually what's really deeply important is that connection.
Presence right here, right now.
Yeah.
Hard to do, but so much joy when you're really there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last closing question that I ask every guest on the show is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
I think it's about really owning all of those sexual desires, owning them, expressing them with someone you trust, and knowing that it's okay to have those thoughts. There's nothing naughty, there's nothing filthy, there's nothing dirty about your mind. And sometimes we don't have to play them out. Like, we just need to actually acknowledge them as our thoughts and feelings, and it stops people be themselves. So I'm a massive advocate for just really voicing those desires and owning them.
Yeah, there's endless ways that we can play creatively, right? Endless, so many different narratives, role plays. There's so much there when you get into
yes.
it. Yes. And so being able to normalize that and play with that, I think, I do believe that conversations like this in the large run will be a part of what ends rape culture, right? It's fueled by silence. It's fueled by shame. It's fueled by not talking about any of this stuff. And so every time that we kind of step up to the plate to talk about these dynamics and get more open discussion, I do think that is shaking the system to eventually dismantle that harm that is ongoing in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it has been so lovely to have you today, Claire. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nicole. I've loved this conversation.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And I want to invite you too, for all of the listeners that have really enjoyed connecting with you, hearing about your story, your upcoming book, right? Where can they find all of your stuff? Where do you want to plug?
So I am really, really vibing with Instagram right now. So the Wild Woman CEO is my Instagram handle. I do have a website, which is clairedore.com. But yeah, that's where they can find me.
Well, yeah, thank you for joining me today. There's a lot I shared even personally about myself, and it takes, a guest where I can look at and feel safe enough to look in that mirror, right? So I appreciate you for creating the space for me to talk about my personal pieces and for you to trust me as well to hold some of your lived experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.